All right, let's dive right into this explainer and transform those incredibly dense language acquisition theories into your ultimate playbook for becoming the ideal teacher. We are going to take all that complex, heavy research and distill it down into real, actionable steps that you can bring to life in your classroom literally today.
So, we are kicking things off by challenging you to adopt a totally new mindset. I want you to completely forget what is just reasonable or practical for a chaotic Tuesday morning. Seriously, picture yourself as the absolute Energizer Bunny of education. The ideal teacher never, ever gives up on a student. If one teaching method just isn't clicking, you pivot. You immediately switch gears and use whatever method actually works to help that specific student cross the finish line. Oh, and you have one unbreakable absolute rule: never humiliate or embarrass a student.
To keep our stress levels low, here is our roadmap. We'll start with the brain versus environment. Then, meet the master theorists, look at methods in the classroom, go over navigating language stages, and finish up with the ideal teacher mindset.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the brain versus environment. Now, you know the great debate of language acquisition? It basically sits on this massive spectrum. Over on the left, we've got the environment side. This theory views a child's brain at birth as a totally blank slate, or tabula rasa, if you want to get fancy. The idea is that language is just a habit formed by listening to and copying the people around you. But then, way over on the right, we have the brain side, or nativism. This side argues, no way, kids are born with a highly specialized, built-in biological system that is ready to go. They aren't just copying, they have this incredible natural ability to actively create language rules, even rules they've literally never heard before. And the ideal teacher? Well, they understand how to pull from both sides of the spectrum.
Moving right along to Section 2, meet the master theorists.
Let's start with Vygotsky. Vygotsky introduced this absolutely vital formula known as the Zone of Proximal Development, or ZPD. It's defined so beautifully. What a child can do with help today, they can do alone tomorrow. So the ideal teacher is constantly using temporary scaffolding, things like sentence frames or graphic organizers. You provide that support so the lesson isn't overwhelmingly hard, but it's not boringly easy either. It's just right. And as that student learns, you just gradually pull that scaffolding away.
Next up, we have Stephen Krashen and his highly tested monitor model. According to Krashen, you absolutely have to watch out for the affective filter. Think of this as the stress, the embarrassment, or just the pure fear of being wrong that literally builds a brick wall in the brain and blocks language acquisition. So what does the ideal teacher do? They actively keep this filter low by creating an incredibly safe environment. And that means never publicly humiliating a student or correcting them right in front of the whole class.
Krashen also gives us this absolute golden rule: comprehensible input, famously known as I+1. It's pretty simple. Think of I as a student's current language level. So if a student only knows 100 words in Spanish, you provide input that uses 110 words. You want the material to be mostly understandable, but with just a slight, completely manageable challenge. That way, they acquire the language naturally, pretty much exactly like a child does.
All right, so here is your ultimate cheat code. Matching the theorists to their keyword and their specific approach to student mistakes is going to be your best friend here. Skinner, over on the environment side, is all about habits and drills, meaning you correct errors immediately so bad habits don't get a chance to form. Vygotsky wants you to guide them using scaffolding. Chomsky believes kids are born with a language acquisition device, or LAD, so his advice is don't overcorrect. Their brains are naturally figuring out the rules. And Krashen? He reminds us to never correct publicly, keeping that affective filter nice and low.
Let's look at how this actually plays out in Section 3, Methods in the Classroom.
First up is total physical response, or TPR. Guys, this method is incredibly powerful. The teacher gives a command, models it, and the students simply perform the action. It is absolutely perfect for beginners who are in their silent period. TPR relies entirely on physical actions. It's honestly a lot like a high-stakes game of Simon Says in the target language. It builds up that crucial listening comprehension without the paralyzing stress of forcing a kid to speak before they're actually ready.
Now, what if you've got a student whose affective filter is just through the roof? I'm talking high anxiety. Well, you might pull Suggestopedia right out of your toolkit. In this method, students sit in comfortable chairs, you've got soft classical music playing in the background, and the teacher reads dialogues with dramatic, engaging emotion. You're basically creating a spa-like, relaxing environment where their anxiety just plummets, making the brain so much more receptive to acquiring the language.
Notice how these two methods sit at complete opposite ends of the spectrum? On the left, the audiolingual method comes straight from Skinner's behaviorism. It is heavily focused on drills, repetition, memorizing dialogues, and correcting errors the exact second they leave a student's mouth. But on the right, we've got Krashen's natural approach. This is almost the exact opposite. It's communication-heavy, it focuses on providing comprehensible input in a really low-stress environment, and any correction is done totally in private so no one gets embarrassed.
Which brings us nicely to Section 4, Navigating Language Stages.
Because the ideal teacher doesn't just pick a method out of a hat, right? Looking at this timeline of second language development, you can see that from 0 to 6 months, students are in the pre-production, or silent period. That is exactly where you'd leverage TPR because they're just soaking it all in. But by the time they hit intermediate fluency around 3 to 5 years, their sentences are getting much longer. You wouldn't use explicit, abstract cognitive grammar explanations during that early silent period. You save those heavy-lifting cognitive approaches for the intermediate and advanced stages when their brains are actually ready to process them.
And finally, we hit Section 5, the ideal teacher mindset.
So check out these phrases, yo, go to the store, or she bringed it. Now, a traditional mindset might look at that and think, yikes, that's a failure, time for a drill. Actually, scratch that. According to Chomsky's Nativism, this is called overgeneralization, and it is absolutely not a failure. It is pure brain magic. It proves the student has an active language acquisition device, and they are independently creating language rules, like realizing you add ed to make a past tense. Sure, you gently model the correct form over time, but internally, you are celebrating this as a massive win.
We also absolutely have to touch on discourse theory from Hymes. He brought us the concept of communicative competence. Basically, this means knowing what to say, to whom, when, and exactly how to say it. Grammatical perfection? That's not the ultimate goal here. Think about it. If a student asks, "Can you pass the salt at a dinner table?" knowing that it's a polite social request and not a literal medical question about your physical ability to lift a salt shaker, well, that is far more important for real-world communication than having flawless grammar.
And look, you really can't teach communication without teaching culture. It's the whole shebang. You have to keep Schumann's Acculturation model in mind. This model tells us that learning a second language is deeply, fundamentally dependent on how much a learner adopts and connects with the new culture. As the ideal teacher, your job is to lower that cultural distance. You do this by creating a highly welcoming environment that values a student's native culture while simultaneously making the target culture feel accessible and exciting rather than strange or threatening.
So pulling this all together, here is your ultimate cheat sheet summarizing exactly how you navigate that massive spectrum between environment and brain to set your students up for major success. You keep that affective filter low by avoiding public humiliation. You provide comprehensible input right at I+1. You scaffold their learning in the zone of proximal development. You match your teaching method to the learner's specific developmental stage. You actively celebrate those overgeneralization errors like good as solid proof of brain growth. And just like the Energizer Bunny, you never, ever give up on finding the exact method that works for your student.
As you step back into your own classroom, ask yourself, which of these brilliant theories is going to anchor your core teaching philosophy? And maybe even more importantly, when a student inevitably struggles, are you going to blame the student, or will you pivot your method to unlock their true potential? Trust the natural acquisition process, become the Energizer Bunny your students desperately need, and who knows, you just might become the ideal teacher they remember forever.